So in this video, we're going to briefly talk about John Rainey's video about why he left Christianity. Link in the description. Definitely go watch that before you watch what I have to say about it, because otherwise, you know, lacking context and stuff. Okay, but I'm going to try and fairly represent what he shared. I've only watched the video once, so if I get stuff wrong, feel free to leave stuff in the comments. John, if you're watching this, awesome. I'm such a tiny channel. Awesome. Thanks for coming over here and looking at it and stuff. But I wanted to talk about this particular video because I watched it today. And also, it's something that kind of indicates kind of where we are as Christians, right? Because we sit at the intersection between people who say there is nothing but philosophical naturalism, there's nothing but the natural world, and all the way down to people who are like, yeah, there is lots of reincarnation and the supernatural world and all of this kind of stuff. And we're just sitting kind of smack in the middle of that. Because even though you might not believe this, there are a lot of people who believe in reincarnation in 2025 when I'm recording this video. Like, yeah, this is a well understood belief. Okay, so this is a thing. Go watch his video to kind of get the context of everything that he's talking about. But when he talks about his deconstruction, he says the first kind of part where he started with this, if I understand correctly, is this hypothetical discussion that he had with a really nice old Catholic lady at the Catholic church they kept on circling while he was walking with his son. And he was saying, okay, well, this lady, hypothetically, right, has this works-based notion of salvation, but she's really nice, loves God, just like I do, loves Jesus, all this kind of stuff. And God's going to send her to hell because she has a works-based mentality, whereas I have a saved by grace alone mentality. So, but why would God send her to hell, right? And I would start by saying, if you're basing your deconstruction based off of a hypothetical, then you should probably go talk to people who actually have these beliefs. If you want to know more about what Catholics believe, I guess I'd recommend Council of Trent. Trent Horn seems to be right on, pretty solid, knows what he's talking about, or at least, as far as I can tell. I'm not Catholic, so I don't know, but he seems to have some really good stuff to say, and he's actually addressed this. And if I can find the video, or at least one of the videos, I'll link down below, or you can go look through his stuff. I'm sure he's talked about this before, right? Like, do Catholics actually have a works-based mentality? No, they don't. They don't at all. That's not how they are. And Jews, by the way, don't either. And that's something that Heiser has talked about, which is great. It's good to understand where people are actually coming from with all of this. So first, that premise is wrong. That Catholics teach this idea that you need to do certain works to be saved. Now, with that, right, that it's merit-based salvation. Now, at the same time, are there things that you should do, right? As Christians, yes. As people who follow Jesus, Jesus tells us to do things, we need to obey him, right? But does that mean that we merit salvation? No, we don't merit salvation through that, but it is something that we do as we follow Jesus as he leads us. And those are important things for us to think about, especially for Protestants who are really lulled into the, just believe in Jesus and everything's cool, right? Like, no, actually, you need to live like Christ wants you to, too, right? That's something that we are called to do. Now, of course, the questions of like, well, how much do you need to do? How far does grace go? All of that kind of stuff. Good questions for us to be wrestling with and talking about when we think about working out our salvation with fear and trembling, right? So I think that is an important thing for us to think about. But first, don't just start with a hypothetical. But the question behind it is actually really interesting, right? Like, what do you have to believe in order to get to heaven? What do you have to do? What's the process through which that happens? And how do you avoid then hell, right? And so this is an interesting question. He then starts talking about Mormons and all this kind of stuff. And my position currently, and this is my position based off of my observations from talking to Mormon missionaries, is that if you are a Mormon at a surface level, right, where you have come to understand that you need Jesus to save you and you love Jesus and all that stuff, well then awesome. Like, that's great. And stay there. That's great because, yeah, how do we get saved? It's connection with Jesus, right? Connection with Jesus, following him, right? And understanding that his grace and what he has called us to do is what saves us. Jesus is what saves us. My caution for people who are in the Mormon church is that the deeper you go into Mormonism, based off of my understanding, talking to Mormon missionaries, is that you get farther and farther away from Jesus. Because it becomes about eternal progression and it becomes about, like all this stuff about getting a body and souls and, pre-existent incarnate, all of this kind of stuff that's out there, where the language initially is very orthodox sounding, but the further you go in, the farther you get away from, I think, orthodoxy. Okay, and that's based off of my understanding. So if you're a Mormon who's like, I love Jesus and he's my savior, fantastic. If you're getting into stuff where you need a certain sign and a name on a stone okay, get back to Jesus. Okay, stay with Jesus. Okay, that'd be my take. But that's my take. All right. Um, which leads then to the question of like, okay, well, when does God send really nice people to hell, or people who care deeply or want or whatever, right? And you think about, he gives the picture. John gives the picture of his son saying, "Dad, I love you just so much, but I don't know if I'm doing it quite right, right? Like, am I doing it just right?" Okay. Um, yeah, the idea of God sending somebody to hell because they really love him, but like, man, they're not getting it. That's one thing. But here's the deal. Jesus came and said, if you want to know what the Father wants and what the Father's like, that's me. Not me personally, right? But Jesus, right? Okay, Jesus is saying that is that's the Father, and that's the Father's plan of salvation is me. Come through me. That's it. So if someone was to say, like one of my kids was to say, "Dad, I really love you," right? But you're not actually my real dad, and so I'm not going to listen to a thing that you say, and I don't believe that you're actually my dad. Then are they really loving me? Like, what are we even talking about at that point in time? And this goes to Heiser, who says there are no Baal worshipers in heaven, right? Like, you can't be like, well, I love God, but God is actually Baal, right? Because like, no, that's not true, right? And so what gets us into heaven is Jesus, our connection with him. Heiser says believing loyalty. Other people have different language. I say connection with Jesus, right? Where we are connected to him and following after him, recognizing that we're going to need his grace to do so, right? Because I am not following Jesus perfectly at all. Like I'm a pretty terrible follower of Jesus, but I rest in his grace and I stick with him, right? And that's one of the things about David too, right? If you look at David in the Bible, this guy is morally corrupt in a lot of places, right? He is a terrible father. His kids turn out awfully, right? Like just terrible things going on, right? And terrible things happen to him. But he is called a man after God's own heart, even though he is a lying, murderous, adulterous person, right? Like this guy has some blemishes, right? But because he has believing loyalty in Yahweh, right? He is staying with him. And when a prophet comes, he actually repents. But it takes a prophet coming to do that. So like, come on, dude. Like this guy isn't even a model repenter, right? Like, okay, which gives hope for people like me who need Jesus to save them. Okay, so that is the question of hell, okay, which is how that works, right? Because if you say, no, I don't want Jesus, I don't like Jesus anymore, nah, well then you're not actually following God then. And you don't actually love God, even though you say that you do. Okay, all right, so then we get into the hallucinogenic, right? This is his final step into or out of Christianity, right? Into the other world, right? And so the reason why, and he kind of is like, I thought, Christianity tells you like, don't do these kinds of things. Why not? Okay, so why don't we do hallucinogenics, right? Not because drugs are just evil, right? And there was an interesting video I watched on like the war against drugs and like what's going on and all that kind of stuff. But here's the deal, like, if you are taking drugs to get yourself into an altered spiritual state where you can connect with the supernatural, right? That actually isn't new. Despite New Age saying that it's whatever, right? It is actually an ancient practice, and you can go just about anywhere in the world where they're dealing with the supernatural and like taking drugs to get into an altered state of consciousness to interact with the supernatural world is like well known. Like that's how you do it, right? This is not new. This is well understood and well documented throughout human history as if you want to get in touch with the supernatural, this is how you do it. Why do we as Christians not go to the supernatural world through that mechanism? Well, because as Dr. Michael Heiser points out, when you dial the supernatural, you don't know what supernatural evil you're getting on the other side. And this is where John is like, but I was told that the supernatural, the Satan masquerades as an angel of light, but like I felt so much love and everything was so great. Like this is great. Exactly. That's the whole point of masquerading as light, right? It looks good. And then as you watch what John is talking about from then on, he realizes that it's not just that he needs to understand what God thinks, it's that he needs to understand what he thinks. And then ultimately, if I've understood the title of his book, I haven't looked into it much at all because again, I just watched his video, but like the idea that we become God, right, is actually like fundamental to this whole divine rebellion thing. Okay. And sure, it looks good. It feels good. You know what else feels good? Drinking a tremendous amount of sugar, which I've been doing lately, and it's really unhealthy for me, right? It's really not good how much sugar I am drinking in the various drinks that I have. And that's not great, but it feels good. So how could it be bad? But because it actually is. Just because something feels good, just because it looks good, just because it feels like love doesn't mean that it actually is. And ultimately, where John appears to be right now, based off of his testimony, is that he has gone from a two religion. And I really like this breakdown. I'll give a link to the book and maybe a talk or something if I can find it. Okay, but basically, the idea is that there's two religions where it's you. And then there's God, right? God and you and the rest of the universe and all that kind of stuff. And then there are one religions. And one religion says that God is the universe and you are God and all that kind of stuff. And so John moves from a two religion where there is God and Jesus and that kind of thing. And then there's the rest of creation and all that to a one where he's like, no, actually I'm part of this divine being thing and all that kind of stuff, which is why he's falling into all the stuff about reincarnation. All of that stuff fits within that framework of the universe, if you believe that kind of thing. So this all seems very evident, like it was going to happen. Like this has to be this way because you're falling down that path. So I don't know. That was just, as I watched it, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Yep, that makes sense too. I see where that's going. Yep, that makes sense too. So there you go. Like John's path, his deconstruction from Christianity makes a lot of sense with what he's talking about because he's going down these very natural paths. Now, if hell is something that is currently bothering you, that's reasonable, right? Like, because our understanding of hell is like, well, that sounds really awful, right? And I made a very, very short video about hell a while back. Christians disagree on this topic, and there's a lot of discussion to be had about it. So I don't think that you should abandon Jesus because of your current understanding of hell. I don't think you need to, right? Like, don't do that. Like, it's fine, okay? And if you're going to have a hypothetical discussion, why don't you have a real discussion with people who actually believe these things? And by the way, atheists have called out Christian apologists for this as well, where they've kind of knocked over straw men instead of actually debating the the actual atheists. And so I think that we should do that as Christians. We should actually talk and engage with the real ideas, not just the straw men. So have the discussion. Go for it, okay? And then the reason why you don't take hallucinogenic drugs to get into the touch with the supernatural is because on the other side of that, there is evil. Because if you are looking for supernatural power, right, then that's about you taking control of things. And as Christians, we are called to give that up and to follow Jesus where he's leading us and trust in his power to do what he's going to do, regardless of what that works out for us. And Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane is a perfect example of that for us. Okay, that's what I've got for today. Do you have any further thoughts on this? Feel free to leave them in the comments below. Hopefully this was helpful in some way. I don't know. Okay, yeah. So I just want to share that. Have a great day.